Good morning, everyone. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Bhakti, and I'm part of the event facilitating team at India International Brand Summit. On behalf of everyone at IIBS, I'd like to welcome you all to our virtual event spanning 2 days, 5 sessions with 18 esteemed speakers. We hope that you'll find the sessions insightful and engaging. We are streaming live on our website, iibrandsummit.com/live. We are also streaming live on our Facebook and YouTube channels. You'll find the links on our website. Before we start the first panel, we at IIBS would like to express our sincere gratitude to all the sponsors and partners for extending their support for this event. Thanking the presenting partner Magnon Group, our media partners NewsX and Brand Equity, digital partner Alt Balaji, knowledge partner TAPI Management Institute Manipal, talent partner Talent Track, event partner CPM, online media partner Talent Town, publishing partner Tree Shade Books, and process partner Nine Triangles. So, with a lot of excitement, introducing the speakers for our first panel, Decoding Consumer Journeys in the New Normal. For this session, we have our speaker plus moderator, Mr. Vivek Merani, Managing Director of Magnon EG Plus, part of Fortune 200 Omnicom Network. So, straight out of college, Vivek started his career at Magnon 2 decades ago. He was named Managing Director of Magnon EG Plus in 2014 at the young age of 33. This made him perhaps the youngest ever MD of a multinational agency in India. He has been profiled as a case study in the bestseller book, 30-something CEO. Vivek leads client relationships across international markets, including North America, Europe, Australia, and the Middle East, apart from India, and works with several Fortune 100 brands. Welcome to IIBS, Vivek.
Thank you, Bhakti. Thank you for the very generous introduction.
So, the next speaker I'd like to introduce is Mr. Guneet Singh, Global Head of Creative and Marketing Solutions at Google. In his current role, he incubates a new function to help digitize India's top brands, their teams, and also the creative and media agency ecosystem. Till recently, as head of consumer marketing at Google, he helped lay foundation for all of Google's consumer businesses in India. Over 15 years, he has worn many career hats like consumer marketing head, product manager, brand marketer, P&L owner, strategy and insights minor, team developer, evangelist, and even an entrepreneur. He has been at the heart of technology, having worked with brands like Google, Microsoft, and Samsung. Welcome to IIBS, Guneet.
Thank you so much. I don't recall remembering all of the stuff that I've done so well as you did. So thanks for that introduction.
You're welcome. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Divya Dixit, Senior Vice President at Alt Balaji. She comes with a solid background of having 20 years experience in managing businesses and building brands across multiple industries of digital, broadcasting, telecom, music, and retail. With many accomplishments under her belt, in the past she has worked with Z5, Percept, Saregama, Tata Docomo, Star TV Network, UTV, Sony Entertainment Network, to name a few. Welcome to IIBS, Divya.
Thank you so much. It seems like I have hopped a lot of jobs now that you mention it, but thank you so much for having me here. It's a great pleasure.
Thanks, Divya. So thank you, Vivek, Guneet, and Divya for joining us today. Let's begin our first session. Over to you, Vivek.
Thank you very much, Bhakti. Yeah, you know what, Divya, this is like two extremes of the world then. You know, I haven't seen anything else but Magnon for 20 years, and you've been through the messy middle. So
yeah. I think I'm a product of the messy middle because I'm so middle class. You know.
Well, I guess yes, most of us, kind of have that background and coming from here. So I would have loved this if this session was face to face. Have been great, and all the people who've joined us. I heard last there were like more than 2,000 people who've registered for the event. So
that's nice.
So no pressure. I don't know if we're on this thing, but I think let's just have some fun and exchange gyan, as we call it. Face to face hote, so it would have been an advantage. The advantage of not being face to face is none of us had to get up early in the morning and take an early morning flight to get to where we have to.
To get to a venue which is half a stadium to accommodate 2,000 people.
I tell you, yes, absolutely. So
but that's wondering why 2,000 people want to listen to us. Honestly, I'm wondering that.
No, I think what's happening with a lot of events, and this is the new normal. In the new normal, I think people have just found it easier to to be able to educate themselves without having to go through a lot more effort. So, perhaps why. And we've been seeing this, working with our clients and understanding that participation with online events is at a all-time high. So and entry barriers are less. So there are no bouncers, or gatekeepers not letting you in, and there are lots of people letting you in. So I guess that's how. Cool. Jumping on to our topic, and new normal is, I think, everybody is talking about it, and it's probably been spoken about very exhaustively. Today, I think what we can focus on essentially is changes in the consumer behavior during the new normal. There have been a lot of things that we've seen changes across our personal lives. I think we're of course, we were researching online for a long time, and perhaps going to stores and buying stuff online. So research online, purchase offline was happening, but now I think it's moved to a world where research is online, of course, but a lot of purchasing also has moved to online. And I think we were more social in the pre-caveman days, or the pre-COVID times. We were going out more, we were socializing more, we were going to movies. We're not doing that anymore. We're socializing more. So there's a lot of digital content consumption that's happening. And I think as marketeers, it's perhaps going to be important for us to understand what those consumer behavior changes have been. And I think Google has done a great job with its report called the Decoding the Messy Middle, where they've kind of looked at changing consumer behavior. The Google Consumer Insights team have put in a lot of research into this, a lot of science into this. And let's free flow talk through that session. I think in the format that we'll keep, I think it's best to keep it most conversational. So Guneet, Divya, feel free to, while I'm supposed to be the moderator, feel free to take on at whatever stage. And we also have questions perhaps coming in on the side. So I think we can just kind of take on questions as and when they come in.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Sure.
Divya, do you want to kick off with anything, considering you're in the heart of all the content that's happening? We're just researching what's happening. So
Okay. So let me start with the fact that first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I don't know what else can I say which Google has already not researched, or put Google Insights onto it, to the point of Google also tracking how are we spending the minutes and those moods in those minutes. So it's gone down to that fine detailing. So I really don't know what I'll be able to add to it further, honestly, but I'll give it a little bit of a background from my understanding, please. So I have been doing digital for now 6 years, I would say. So right from Eco, which was supposed to create an ecosystem of content, of products, of mobile, as well as of the other appliances, to moving to launching a Z5, to moving to an old and scaling up the business largely. Now, in this, what I have seen is that the consumer has evolved so much. And when I say evolved, like Vivek rightly said, a lot of decisions for us earlier used to be going to the stores. I mean, when at least I started my era, I would say, and I'm old, it used to be going to the stores, browsing through stores, feeling awkward at times, because many people would walk up to you and say, madam, and then you had to just say, cringe and say, I'm just looking, I'm just browsing, because you really don't want to commit to a purchase over there and go through multiple stores with a husband tagging along and, making faces and saying, why don't you just buy what you want and be done with it? Yeah, look at me, I just walk into a store, pick up what I want and walk out, and you have to scout like 30 stores, right? To the power coming at my tips now, then I could, websites were created, and brands that we hadn't really heard about, spoken about, seen, were available for us to browse through, see the kind of designs we had in mind, and go to the stores, hopefully looking and figuring out, if I find something similar, to moving to now era, where I don't have to do anything, like you rightly said, Vivek. I mean, in between my meetings, my WhatsApps, my emails, I just go online and I shop for my kirana. I order my groceries online in between meetings. I do shopping for my daughter, screaming, yelling, saying she wants a top. My husband calling me saying, "Hey, listen, this stuff has run out. Can you please order it?" To purchasing stuff that I want, right from brands like, a high street brand like H&M, to even a Zara, to even a Louis Vuitton online, right? And they deliver it home. So word has moved for messy middle as well as for any other. It's moved to convenience and instantaneous browsing and decision for a lot of things. Uh, to a point when e-commerce was happening, to the people used to say, I can't buy clothes online. I just can't, because I need to feel it. I need to wear it. I need to understand how it will fit. To people now shopping everything online, even shoes, right? Shoes is one of the things that you need to feel the fit. You need to walk in it. You need to figure how it works. But because return of the purchase is so easy, you can just give it back. Now, if you apply the same principles for a minute of rational and emotional combination of minds to content consumption for a minute, right? It has become so simple. On the flick of a button, I can decide. First of all, the brands are taking all the effort to reach out to me as a consumer. All the brands, even in the content space, are trying to outshout each other and try to reach the consumer, because even digital inventory is becoming so expensive, right? As the demand and the supply chain works, it's a constant fight between today all the OTT platforms to reach out to the consumer at the minimum expense, outshout each other, right? So that's one part. The second part is the consumer also has become very picky and choosy. The consumer is no longer lured just by one show unless it's a very, very iconic show. I'm speaking purely from a content consumption point of view. The consumer also now demands to see the library. He wants to see, listen, if I take a monthly subscription, what is the value for money? How many shows can I see? Is it worth it? Do I invest my money into it? I mean, the Google report today says that only 1.5 apps of content are downloaded and subscribed, right? Otherwise, the consumer will download the app, browse through the selection, and then probably walk away without subscribing. So this messy middle has created a combination of emotion and rational mind for us, where we can't just show a content to the consumer and say, hey, buy us. There is a consumer journey which spreads across. You start by awareness of the show, moving into the decisions where you show offers, you show library, you set reminders, you do regular recommendation cycles, you work on elevating and enhancing the consumer life cycle by saying, okay, if you're finished Aparan, here is what I have as Bichu Rakhel, which you will love it. And this entire process, I think, is now what is defining the consumer, where the consumer is spoiled for choices. And this is where...
Yeah, and that's why it's called the messy, I think.
Absolutely. He's spoiled for choices. I'm spoiled for choices, right? As a consumer.
Right.
So this is where I think a marketer's job has become a little more tougher.
Right.
It's about getting the footfall into the store and then be constantly with the consumer in an unobtrusive manner, reminding him that he has to buy, right? And fortunately, this is not a shop where the consumer walks away. Even if the consumer walks away, you can eventually remind him to come back to the store, sample some other stuff, and buy again. So this is how, for us, the messy middle has evolved. Over to you, Guneet.
No, I think it's thanks for that, Divya. I think you laid out the full landscape from where it sort of started, and I love the connections you've made from retail to your industry, which is entertainment. I remember these. I'm sure there are many people who are watching who might not really even know the days. I remember I've been born and brought up in Delhi, and I remember the first time the internet came into the country. It was possibly around 25 years ago. It used to, for I was a student then, And for students, one had to go and apply for a special connection from VSNL. There used to be a company called VSNL at that time, which later got bought by the Tatas. And you would get a student connection after a lot of sort of requests and so on. And it could be a dial-up connection, which would have only enough bandwidth to give you text. And you couldn't see anything on the screen. I remember even at that time, which was, that I was very interested in marketing. And I just want to sort of bring alive to people as to, when we talk about a lot of this, it seems, the difference is not very clear at times as to what's happening, because a lot of these conversations end up being, this is today. But what we are grappling with is, if you think of what people study in B school and what marketers study from a lot of content, a lot of those frameworks and models were made, 15, 20 years ago. The IDAs of the world: attention, interest, desire, action, the 4 Ps, which I'm sure most marketers would sort of still at least know if they don't subscribe to using them, were all evolved at that stage when, if you think of a consumer journey, it was possibly reading the Times of India in the morning, saying, hey, I seem to be interested in this, let's say, desktop or this jeans, reading a store address at the bottom, which used to be one of the big reasons that there used to be these massive, 20, 30 cc sections in a half-page print ad, which was just about store addresses, and saying, okay, let me just get to that store and try out the product.
Correct.
On way, the only other stimulus you would have is possibly outdoors, and that's what the brand would then try and keeping you hooked on. They would give you a print ad to possibly start that conversation, or maybe a television ad. At that time, television also wasn't necessarily that prolific. Possibly keeping you hooking on using billboards. And then, as a final resort, use the shop window. And this was literally, if you think of it, there were three stimuluses that a marketer for the jeans or that, or the computer, between 2 extremely different categories, would have to think of. And that's all. That was a consumer journey they would literally sort of think of, because you wouldn't sort of, if you were thinking about buying a jeans, you're not going to scroll Instagram. You won't go to YouTube to see what a stylist is telling you about that jeans. You wouldn't try and like tell your friends over WhatsApp or over chat somewhere and saying, I'm thinking about this, have you got this, get their feedback, because hey, there weren't even mobile phones at that time, which was really trying to do this. So suddenly you've gone from a state where a marketer had to think of 3 triggers to possibly now, which is like an uncountable number of triggers. And you mentioned there is social. I remember, as we mentioned during your show, you talked about the fact that you do promos, which are possibly teasers of what the show is. You do recommendations, which drive what could be the decision making for somebody to tune into a show, and you put reminders for convenience so that they don't miss it if they think they sort of liked it. Now you've gone from just possibly doing a print ad and a hoarding and a shop front to trying to manage so many trigger points for consumers. I think that's where the messy middle is. What the challenge for us is that it's the consumers now does not have a linear journey. Most marketers and most marketing models are designed around linear journeys. Most marketing teams, in fact, are designed around linear journeys. Unfortunately, the consumer doesn't have a linear journey now. The end result of that is statements like the messy middle. I don't think they help though, because what that tells marketers, oh my God, I need to unravel this ball of wool. And frankly speaking, considering today's marketers and their patience levels, which are the same as the average person, which is between you and me possibly today, we don't have this patience to unravel a wool ball, right? So let me just find the 3 simplest solutions. Let me go and tell my agencies, let's buy some TV, let's buy some YouTube, let's buy some Facebook, and hopefully we'll convert. Because they're trying to simplify it in their mind. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the best way to go do it. It might work for some cases, but it's not necessarily the right way to do things. And I think the messy middle really for us was, as Google also got into it, it was not the realization of the messy middle, but it was the realization that marketers are finding it really tough to unravel the messy middle and what to do within it. And that's where the entire journey started. So, if you think of it from a new model perspective, and I'm just sort of sharing that in case people are not very aware, the model still starts with a trigger.
Correct.
Which is the same what would have happened earlier, which would have been a print ad, which would have been a TV ad in the old days. And thanks Vivek for bringing this out. The model then sort of, there's this, if you notice, there is a loop of exploration and evaluation. And it's this exploration and evaluation which has created this non-linearity to the model. If you notice, there is this beautiful color which seems to be sort of flowing into each other between yellow to green, and it seems like an endless loop. And you don't know when a consumer is going to exit that endless loop. It's very difficult to predetermine when a consumer is going to exit the loop between exploration and evaluation. Now, exploration is really all about figuring out what I want. It's category search. Is that the right pair of jeans? Is it the best laptop? Is that the best show? And just exploring more and more to understand what the options are. Evaluation is really things like the recommendation that you mentioned. How do I evaluate? Because now I have so many options that exploration is throwing, and you mentioned this as saying the consumers are spoiled for choice. They're absolutely
more expansive, and evaluation is more reductive in that sense.
Absolutely. And it's spoiling for choice, which is while the consumers are spoiled for choice, they're not necessarily really happy about it, because the human brain cognitively doesn't like the effort of making choice. And you would sort of go back and possibly think about it. If you were in a restaurant which told you I have a set menu of like 7 things versus going to a place which has a buffet of like 350 dishes, imagine which meal are you going to enjoy most at the end of it? Because you'll never taste those 350 dishes. You'll possibly taste like 11 or 14 of them at max instead of the 7, 8. And you'll come back feeling very unsatiated, saying, oh my God, there was so much else that I just didn't manage to touch. And that's the consumer doesn't necessarily feel very excited about so much choice, and which is why that huge bubble on the right, which is about evaluation. So they really try very hard to find all possible ways of bringing down that choice matrix for them, and then taking a call on, hey, what do I do to make this choice, and finally make the purchase, or get into the consumption in case it's a show. That's really the thing. And the biggest part that we've tried to do within this model is to see what are those triggers, so that we don't make this entire journey incomprehensibly tough for marketeers. What I don't want folks who do marketing to step away from today is that, oh my God, we are now in this state where we always keep unraveling the woolen ball and we won't know what's coming out. It still boils down to consumer behavior, which is very human. So humans haven't evolved as fast as the media around humans have evolved. I'd actually love to hear from you, right? If you've spent some time in the industry, if you were to sort of look back at how shows would hook into people earlier versus now, what are the differences that you might see that you've seen happening?
So yes, of course, because I've done broadcast prior to this, there used to be a era, I don't know how many people here listening to this session will remember, Kyunki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, which used to do this crazy TRPs of 60s and 70s, on Star Plus. Nobody had heard of it. People were like, what? This used to be their reaction. Cut to today. So even if I take a broadcast today, right, a Big Boss today does a 2.5 TRP. Okay, and that's Big Boss, the vicarious living that this so-called generation loves, enjoys, and not only so-called generation, probably people of our generation as well, right? Cut to the fact that you're not talking about a digital content consumption, where everybody's got a mind of their own. And I can tell you everybody's got a mind of their own. I mean, I have seen segments to subsegments emerge from every show. Right from the kind of people who would come unexpectedly on a certain product that we didn't even imagine. So, for example, on a show called Barish, I had never expected that there will be an urban male audience. It's a very family-oriented love drama saga, right? And there emerged all of a sudden an audience of urban male audience coming onto it, actually from iPhones, and we were shocked. We were shocked beyond our imagination, for the simple reason that till then these people were mostly present on crime thrillers, maybe a little bit of action dramas and things like those. All of a sudden you're seeing another segment emerge. Cut to, there is a certain segment of people who fluctuate between different kind of genres of shows, absolutely unrelated, right? So that's another segment altogether that you need to target and you need to work with. It necessarily doesn't mean that you end up creating content targeting only these segments. What you need to understand through this is, hey, there is a possibility that a person who's been watching, let's say, a Code M, which is a action thriller, could possibly also walk into and watch a Kehne Ko Hum Safar Hai, which is a very middle-aged family drama actually made for women. So these are, like I said, the consumer, and you rightly said, consumers spoiled for choices, but not necessarily that the consumer will have a linear behavior. The consumer will zigzag, the consumer will sample, the consumer will probably then say, okay, I can watch this a little bit. And there are multiple consumers that we see in the life cycle where probably they have walked into a show, seen 2 episodes, not liked it, dropped out, and walked into another show altogether, right? Now, that's a choice you can make for digital. Unfortunately, you can't make that choice with TV, right? You may choose to walk off, but it's an appointment viewing. Every night, 9 o'clock, I have to tune in to watch a single episode. The single episode will not allow me to decide whether I want to continue with this content or not. So I must watch it for at least a week to decide what I want to do and what I don't want to do. Digital has changed all that, the digital content consumption cycle. Like I said, sub-segments coming out of it, consumer zigzagging, so I'll give an example. We've 2 shows, Aparan and Bichu Ka Khel. And one of the points I was discussing with my performance team yesterday was, we saw this behavior where on Aparan, a consumer moved from the first episode to the second episode within 30 minutes, right? So you take, now that is an average.
Fast forwarding and watching? Or
No. So typically what happens with our platform is that we are a freemium model. So the first episode is free, and after that you have to subscribe to watch the rest of the episodes. And that's why we are called a SVOD platform, subscription-driven platform. We don't have a AVOD revenue model, right? Therefore, we typically map that how many percentage have moved from first to the second, because that's how you attribute the subscription to the show. And B, you also typically look at how engaging the content is. So the percentage of people that actually move from first episode to the second episode to finishing the episode to what is the time gap that they take moving from the first episode to the second episode, right? So we saw that while in Aparan it took them 30 minutes, in Bichu Ka Khel it probably took them 25 minutes, right? The percentage also was higher, right? So these are the examples that you're working with constantly to understand whether the product is a success or not, whether the consumer is reacting positively or not, and what are the sub-segments that are emerging out of every content. And this is what then adds to your data and analytics at the back end through which you do the machine learning. Because, you know, while people use this word machine learning so abjectly and everybody says machine learning doesn't happen like that. It takes years of data for machine learning to happen. And I know that because we've been trying to create a predictive model internally and we don't have enough data for it, you know.
I wonder why. I wonder why Guneet is laughing.
Because Guneet knows what I'm saying. And I'm frustrated with people saying machine learning. But do you have enough data at the back end to do machine learning? So that's my first question. Right? You may still be able to do basic analytics, etc., but it takes years of width and depth of data to actually say, okay, my machine learning is at a certain level where I can start a predictive model behavior. That's where I stand. I don't know about Guneet, over to you.
No, I agree. I think I couldn't agree more. I think machine learning is a very casually thrown around word right now.
Correct.
And people believe that there is this beautiful sort of server farm somewhere which will possibly take 2 people's consumption habits and predict the next 20,000 people's production, consumption. But I also think it's really the reverse of what used to happen earlier. I often used to say one of the big challenges that our marketers face, and I know we're pretty much at the halfway milestone, so I'm just going to work towards the complications that marketers see before we start talking about possibly how we can simplify it. We talked about the journey becoming non-linear, messy, and that's a complication for marketers. But also from segmentation, which you talked about, Divya. I've often had conversations with some very senior marketing people who spent like decades in the industry. And they often come and struggle with this segmentation. That's because the tradition of segmentation in our world has been a typical organization will, depending on the budget, will afford a survey of 500 or 5,000 consumers. And you'll go to a Nielsen or an ORG or somebody and get this survey done. Now you'll extrapolate from those 500 consumers, possibly what a 50 million audience looks like. Now, what will a research firm do? They'll take those 500 and they'll say, I think there are 5 clusters that emerge in these 500, right?
Correct.
I find this cluster, which is, let's say, late night watchers. I find this cluster which are like action lovers. I find love these clusters. And if have fancy labels will appear on a 2x2 graph. And these clusters will appear as either circles or ovals, depending on the research firm's design aesthetics on a slide. And we'll then design a brief and marketing plan behind those circles.
And
right?
and
That's what marketers used to
No,
do.
but it's like Bach, guys. Remember, Bach has some 25,000 meters now, which predicts the behavior of 1.2 billion people in this country. So I completely agree with what you're saying. Sorry, just go back. I completely agree with what you're saying, and which is why I keep saying that your analytics is not robust enough till you have run it for a certain period of time with a certain width and depth of the data. That's where I stand. Sorry.
I agree. Oh, absolutely. And I think what's happening now is because we have a better measure, like you mentioned, right? You can now see a user who's dropped out at the 25th minute or dropped at the 30th minute and then taken a decision to subscribe or not subscribe. Those journeys are now a lot more visible. Those journeys were not visible earlier. Now you've been able to track those journeys. Unfortunately, as you track those journeys, those 4 or 5 bubbles, which used to be the big segments that marketeers created, started becoming micro segments. And in fact, now for really good marketeers, it's actually becoming individuals. So you're going from a space where you had 5 segments you used to choose to possibly 15 segments and trying to choose 10 to possibly a stage where you might have 45, 50 segments. I know, for example, that some of the largest e-commerce players who had enough data to be able to analyze, if not be predictive about the behavior, have up to 2,500 segments. If you look at some of the top e-commerce players that have in the country, they have 2,500 segments which they go after. And their marketers have to struggle with that. Sorry, Vivek, you were saying.
No, I'm saying absolutely just taking a cue from that. And I think the struggle of marketers is very evident from there. So, we have an example of Nestle, and we work with Nestle very closely. They have this content platform called Ask Nestle. And they've identified these are mothers from, in various brackets, mothers of children of 0 to 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 7. So they have these 4 or 5 broad buckets of mothers. Those segments we've kind of, worked with Nestle, created multiple segments, like literally 100 plus sub-segments. And then we've worked on creating a communication plan for each of those segments.
Correct.
So now I think the biggest challenge for marketers is for personalization is the kind of content that you need to create for every segment, because data everybody can create segmentation, but you cannot have a one size fits all communication for brands. So that's where, as an agency, we're seeing this, and, this is like a big challenge for customers, the amount of content they're having to create. And it gets even more complex when that content is to be divided across the typical the funnel from the awareness content and consideration and purchase. And now, of course, we're moving to this more non-linear infinite loop consumer journey. So we have segmentation, and then we have which stage of their purchase journey they are in, which is non-linear in that sense. So you need to have a lot of content for that. And then imagine the mediums which are also available. So you have display, you have video, you have emailers, you have voice, you have there's so much. There are so many touch points of getting that communication over. As an agency, we're doing literally for every client about 500-600 pieces of content every day, like very active brands which are creating because they need to create that much content. And content over here is not typically like the print ad. I think that was a beautiful example, Guneet. We've seen that happen with our clients, HP being one of our clients, which used to rely heavily on print advertising. In 2020, there's no print that they've literally done. They've done, bits and pieces, but it used to be like 90 print, 10 digital. Now it's, it's literally
completely skewed.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where, and that evolution has perhaps also happened because of, is because how you can pinpointedly, communicate with your smaller segments of customers. So great point, Guneet, on that segmentation piece. Sorry, I just hijacked your.
No, absolutely.
Let you finish.
I just also want to be careful, right? I've been on the receiving end at a certain part of my career, listening to a lot of these sessions by marketing folks, and coming back at times believing that, oh my God, did I learn something, or did I just learn that I'm getting more confused? So I do want to make sure that in the next 15, 20 minutes, we try and
Sure. Let's get
how to unravel the messiness of micro-segmentation and nonlinear paths, and possibly give them some hints of, what can they do? And what I don't want them to take away is and say, oh my God, we are marketers, which was the wrong profession. Let us tear our hair out because this is not getting simple. That's not what they should be taking away at the end of the session.
Yeah, we logged into this
by the
session
way,
and it confused us more. So let's try and
I
solve
think
it.
one of the simplest things is Google contextual ads. I love those. Only thing is, it's bloody expensive to me. I want to tell you that. So
well, I always look at expense as a matter of, if you were wasting like $8 and you're spending $10 and only 2 were useful.
Yeah. The return is going to come. The return is going to come. It's going to come a little later.
So Guneet, maybe you can help us, move towards the solution and solve it, and like Divya is saying, maybe, and can it please be a little cost effective, please?
Yes, please.
Let me actually not about any products from us, right? I think if you think of it, one, I would be wrong to say that all solutions for unraveling the messy middle sits on Google. I don't think that's true. I think there's a large chunk of what consumers come and discover, both in their exploration and evaluation phase on Google, and our properties, which could be across YouTube, etc. But there's a lot of it that happens outside. And I think what's really important is, and which is exactly what, when we did the messy middle research, we started bringing it down to some fundamentals of consumer behavior, because those don't change, right? Those fundamentals will exist whether a consumer is on YouTube or on Instagram, or possibly seeing some content somewhere else on a large screen. Those fundamentals will change. So I don't know, Vivek, if you actually have the slider which has the 6 pieces that were found.
Yes.
Perfect. Yes. That'll be great. I'd love for people to be able to see this before I actually walk through them. So these are some of the 6 pieces. Now they seem really simple, and unfortunately our team didn't make like some acronym model on this, like a CASP, SSP or something like that. They didn't sort of convert that, but I'm assuming that's also because a bunch of these are just not new. But I think we need to be careful as marketers as to how we apply them. I think the first, which is category heuristics, right? It's that's not something which is very new. A lot of people who run their business already keep in mind what are the triggers and barriers for purchase. I think what this basically says is narrow down on them really, really deeply, but also be conscious that it's not one. Typically what's happened is, if you look at communication and content that brands have made, they would look at 1 or 2 barriers or triggers and craft their entire communication and content around that. The reality, as Divya also pointed out with micro-segmentation, is that you will have people who will have a different set of triggers and different set of barriers. It's important to be able to map that entire trigger barrier set out and create that additional pieces of content which can go back and be relevant to that audience. So it starts from that. It starts really from saying, do I understand the full landscape of my categories, triggers, and barriers in the consumer mind space? And have I managed to narrow them down to a few, not one? So that's one big change, if you think of from the traditional piece of marketing to this, is to narrow them down to a few and then say, how will I create content which either overcomes a trigger, overcomes a barrier, or drives a trigger? But look at creating not just one, but creating a few of them. So that's really the first one, because when consumers are faced with this choice, they go back to these basics to help resolve that choice. Right. They want to, so if you're looking at phones, for example, there will be, the reality is you could have 75 features in a phone, but people will go back to some of the basic, simple ones which they like. How big is the screen size? What is the megapixel of the camera? I mean, I've seen phone models with megapixel in cameras which people will never even ever use in their life. The megapixel has a strength to cover the wall behind me at full without getting burst. But I don't know who's going to print a picture that's that large. But people will buy because it's got megapixels in it, right? So these are some of the, you would say, the category heuristics, right? You need to be clear about what those heuristics are and what are they for your multiple segments of audiences.
Like a battery life for a laptop, or
absolutely. Right.
I mean, examples of more examples of heuristics would be those. Yeah.
Absolutely. The other ones are authority and social, and I think they're close to each other. But this is basically about feeling, because there's so much choice, feeling comfort in the value of collection and domain knowledge. right? So if I collectively feel that a bunch of other people like me are also consuming this or purchasing this, that social proof allows me to be feeling, helping me narrow my choices down from the wide pool that's available. Similarly, authority, I might not know, and therefore the power of recommendation becomes really, really important. So things like, having 4-star ratings instead of 5-star of ratings, or having knowing that, you'll see so many content pieces saying 11,000 people are seeing this right now. These are all soft cues of either social proof or authorities biases that can be built in. How often do we bring this in is the question, and are we letting things like authority be organically there for a category or a brand, or are we planning for it? These are some of the things that I would say one needs to think through. I can go to the next three, but if you guys, both Divya, Vivek, if you have any points on these top three, we can pause, get your thoughts around those before I move to the next three.
No, actually, I think you've pretty much set the context to how we also work on marketing. So, for example, when you launch a product, you're obviously going to go about the content discovery in multiple manners, right? More than just using a Facebook, which is a social media, or a UAC, or an Insta. We work with, for example, influencer marketing, which is your recommendation marketing, right? So because these influencers, sub-influencers, micro-influencers have a category and a base of fan following of their own. So the recommendations coming from them really, really matter, because if you're still sitting on the fence, you're unsure about whether you want to be a part of this product journey or not, they help you make that, which is actually more emotional. Then comes the rational decision when you look at the fact that if this product is also coming with an offer of, let's say, an Amazon Pay, which allows you a 40% discount right away then and there. And then these two powers combined with the fact that at the back, how comfortable is the consumer actually with using your product, which is your UI, UX experience? Is it simplistic, the sign-up process, his journey through your product? So it's typically putting all these soft and rational cues together today, which define the consumer journey for us. And then we, of course, have a consumer journey where a person may have looked at your product, may have made a decision, may have downloaded, may have opened it up, and may have also gone through first few minutes, but has still postponed the decision. And then there are further soft cues that you build to drive that purchase decision. So yes, I think largely this slide covers all those things that we work with.
Yeah, Guneet, please go ahead and cover the other three also and tell us more about it. That'll be great. And then, we also have some questions. We'll probably keep about the last 10 minutes for those questions.
Sounds good. Let me try and get through these quickly, right? I think the fundamentals that I just sort to bring the conversation back, the fundamental still rests on category heuristics, right? Which are the triggers and barriers that are there. The rest of them are really helping to unravel the entire journey and helping people evaluations versus keeping exploring. So, Divya mentioned about how they actually do this for their categories. And I think the authority and the social parts are very clear. She also mentioned on Amazon Pay. That's very interesting, right? Yeah. And that's represented through power of free. It's a very interesting, component of experiment that was done as our teams were doing this research. They offered consumers a $10 coupon on a e-shopping site versus a $20 coupon, which you could buy for $7. Guess what people took? People still took the $10 coupon versus the second one actually gave $13 worth of value. So if you were to think of the consumer value, these are like straight cash coupons, so it doesn't come with redemption issues, etc. None of those overlays. The fact is that people still went for that free $10 versus the $7 would have got them $13 worth.
Correct.
And that's really somehow the components of the power of free. Which starts showing through, right? So very often there are very small pieces of, hey, you will get this extra, which can help people make a decision between one and the second. So whether it's a 1-month subscription or a 3-month subscription, if the 3-month has a little bit extra that's built in, you'll see people, that's the way for marketers to cue people into that longer 3-month possibly versus a 1-month.
Yeah, I think another example is like hotels. You may not actually go down and eat breakfast, but if there's breakfast free, there is a high possibility you choose that. And I think this power of free across categories works beautifully. A FMCG product, selling a big bottle of ketchup with a small new product being introduced into the market free, it works wonders.
Sorry, I'll give you an example here, and I'm so-called A category metro consumer. I order normally my groceries from Starkweek because it has the promise of taking the order same day. And largely, if you order early in the morning, they deliver groceries by evening. So at least you have the same day promise delivered to you, right? When you are placing your order and you're logging out of there, it gives you options of coupon codes, right? So there are coupon codes that give you, certain amount of monies to be purchased for your future purchase, or there is an option available which allows you an immediate gratification on that purchase, right? And guess what? I always opt for immediate gratification, even if it is of lesser value than the future purchase. And that is a very, very inherent consumer insight, which is built into the psyche of at least all the Indian consumers. And that is what we've figured. So when our offers with Amazon Pay, for example, that gives a consumer instant discount, work far better than giving him that little extra mile on the subscription period. And that is what we've always figured. So that's just building on the power of instant gratification with the consumer in making a purchase decision.
I agree. I think that Divya brings the blend of power of free and power of now both together very, very well. So you've actually found the right model of bringing both of those. There's a little bit of free, but there's a little bit of you get it now. And the power of now is becoming very, very important.
Very, very important.
The fact that we can get something as soon as we want it is very, very critical. And consumers have now started in their entire journey because they're spending so much time in evaluating choices. Their patience for once they've evaluated is very low.
But isn't that why digital content thrives? I'm sorry. It's the power of now. It's the power of convenience. It's the power of my fingertip and when I want it, right?
And that's consumer behavior. Yeah.
That's actually, consumer behavior.
You know what? One of the questions which has come in around consumer behavior is that this question was around can consumers be trained around can there be consumer education important? So I think it's to answer that question, and in the context that we're speaking about, consumers will not change. I think as marketers, we need to change according to them. And I think the last
consumers will evolve, consumers will adapt, but there are going to be certain basic intrinsic habits, I would say, or principles which the consumers will always remain. Yes, there's going to be migration of thoughts and beliefs. Like COVID has given us so many new migrations of thoughts and beliefs, right?
Yeah, I think the last point, the sixth point, was the scarcity, which is COVID driven.
Correct.
So I think we've never felt.
I mean, you're hoarding, right? You're hoarding. Look at America; it was hoarding toilet paper for all the things, right?
Right.
Just because the habit is not to use water.
Yeah, that's the instinct.
So your first instinct was to hoard toilet paper because I can't wash. If I can't wash, what do I do? Right?
Learn from us Indians. So
that is. But I think the hoarding piece, I think COVID sort of exemplified it because it brought us back to our very fundamental behaviors as human beings. Right? I mean, we still have spent only a few hundred years from our hunter-gatherer mode. It's not been too long that we were sort of roaming grasslands and hunting and gathering, right? And those codes are still built into us. So we know that if we don't get our food now, we don't know when will it get it next. And some of those elements of hoarding and getting it now, therefore, are very deeply encoded into our psyche. If you're able to
deeply encoded in your DNA also. I'm just bringing it down to the level where your body stores fat. If you're going to starve it, right? Because your body is reacting in the most primal manner to the fact that I don't know when next I'm going to eat. So I might as well hoard what I have, right? And that's the basic instinct of consumer. Now, what do I get now? Tell me that. And that is what drives at least, a lot of subscriptions and a lot of purchase decisions for us as well.
I just want to close on Anupam's question here, which was about consumer education. I think if you tell consumers that you're educating them, they might not want to behave the way you want them to. But if you lead them into it without telling them that you're educating them, they just might. So I think that's where a smart marketer needs to see whether they're positioning it as education or as something which is right for the consumer and just gently lead them on. And that can drive the right behaviors in many ways.
Right. I think, and in a nutshell, like, last 5 minutes before we also get in questions, maybe, what I would like to ask Guneet, both Guneet, you and Divya, that what do you think as as a brand, as a marketer, now that we've spoken about the messy middle and the whole evolved ecosystem, that what are your top two recommendations that that a brand marketer should do, considering the whole messy middle and the changed user behavior? So top two thoughts that you'd like to share, and we can perhaps end that with questions in the end.
Sure. I think for me, really, one is the first one I would say is don't get swept away by all the new models and information. At the core of a marketer is to know your consumer. Just know that you don't need to know one, but you might need to know 15 to make your product more successful, right? So that's the first one. So keep knowing your consumer. If you know your consumer, you'll find ways to, it knows why they will like your product or dislike your product and how to reach out to them. That's really one. Second, I think it's important to also keep in factor that the journey that the consumers have is not going to be linear. And for that, you also need to create your marketing plans in a non-linear manner. I would say if marketers can start snapping and staying back to the original truth of knowing their consumer and making sure that their marketing plans are also as non-linear as their consumers' behavior is, they'll start being able to adapt to this change a lot more easily.
Thank you. I think that completely makes sense. Divya, your thoughts?
Okay, so here's something that I feel as a marketer, which is basically, I think there's a lot of digital jargons that fly around today, right? And I meet a lot of brand marketers and CEOs of my age who say, there's so much happening, don't really know. I think the first thing is really delve deep into the data, not from numbers point of view, also from the insights point of view. Understand your segmentation. That is the most critical thing, because today a lot of, for example, for us, purchases and acquisitions are made basis the segmentation behavior that we tackle. So that's part one. In terms of the brand marketing, I think there are certain fundamentals and principles that have stayed true over decades, which is a lot of people will also subscribe to your brand if they trust your brand. So that brand trust is very critical, right? If the word of the mouth in the market is that your brand is distrustful, disrespectful, is not easy to navigate, or is not easy to deal with, no matter how much acquisition, etc., you try, ultimately those consumers either A, will not convert, or even if convert, they will walk away, right? So these are basics of the brands that you should never ever forget. Also, I believe that at the end of the day, no matter how much a brand shouts itself that I am so good, I am so great, and you should, walk up to me, and you should be part of my journey. You are somebody I want to have on my platter. I think a third-party recommendation model for a brand marketer also works very well. We've seen that when it has been third-party recommendations, it has worked for us on an organic growth piece also very well. Because these are the people, when a third-party platform today says, all Balaji is one of the most admired brands of 2020, right? You're bound to believe it more than you're bound to believe if I say, hey, listen, I won the award. So when a brand says I won the award, it seems like boasting. But when a third party says, listen, I won the award, that sounds, that they won the award, that sounds better. That sounds like they truly deserve the award. And that sounds like the customer should be a part of that journey. So third-party recommendations, ensuring that the consumer trusts you. There is a lot of faith. There is a lot of servicing which is happening, and understanding your consumer segmentation. If the marketer could work with these, I believe the rest all adds up to it and follows the product and the experience withstanding.
Right. Thank you. I think, Divya, that's a great point. And I'll give myself the luxury of also giving 2 points as top. as
you
top.
We're fine with 3, Vivek. You could share 3.
3 also. Yeah. it's the age of content. So, I think, and it also, it answers one of the questions that we've also received, is because there are lots of agency folks also attending these sessions, and they'd like to know what changes do we need to do in the agency ecosystem, and in a way also on the brand side. Now, on the brand side, I think one of the things that's happening is that brands are working with an agency model, which is the old world system. They work with a different media agency, they work with a different activation agency, a different social agency, a different analytics agency, a different CRM agency, a different content production agency, a different creative agency. So, a brand marketer, is left with a choice of, he sees this messy middle. But for him, on the other side, is also a messy ecosystem of the whole agency world that they work in. So one of the things that will need to evolve is that brands will need to start working with more integrated teams, which are more agile, which are more cross-functional, who understand spaces. So it should not be like, oh, I only handle the social mandate. So the authority bias is my responsibility as the agency, but the power of free is the e-commerce agency which is helping you work on it. That's their responsibility. And the creative agency has to think of the category heuristics in terms of helping the mind. So I think as a brand marketer, what brands should be looking at very integrated teams, cross-functional teams who understand various landscapes and are able to offer their whole plan and strategies to clients, to brands, in a more holistic way. And that's something that needs to change. And and I think a lot of brands are waking up to that. So that's my first thought and recommendation. Second, I think brands also need to be very responsible, because now the 6 buttons that you spoke of, Guneet, those could be buttons where I could mislead people also. So I think it's very important for brands to be very responsible in terms of bringing forth their product. So that would definitely be a second recommendation. I think we just have many questions. We just have a couple of questions, if we can take them, and maybe we'll do this as fastest finger first, rapid fire. I'll just read out these questions. So how do you see consumer journeys evolve in post-COVID times? Will it get less messy? Rapid fire.
I don't think so.
I honestly don't think so. It's going to be always a combination of rational and emotional decisions. So it will stay messy.
Right. Okay. So another question. Nice insights for existing brands. Will it be great if you can put some insight on how a new brand can be promoted only on digitally, which fits into the consumer behavior? So question is for new brands versus existing brands.
I love the question. It is so interesting to promote a brand only digitally and not go to the other mediums. And I have been a huge advocate of the same. Please tap all the mediums of Mr. Guneet Singh Google. Look at all the social mediums. Look at affiliate networks. Look at influencers. There's so much. Look at your SEO. Look at your SEO. Build your SEO, because if your SEO is well built up, if your website is well built up, then your ultimate goal should be that your organic traffic should surpass your paid traffic. And that day when it does, your brand has arrived. So yes, it is a great opportunity if you have the chance of promoting a brand purely digitally, and your management and your board is willing to do that. It's a great opportunity, I feel. Over to Guneet.
Yeah, no, I think
as an entrepreneur and with more knowledge now.
I don't think you ever have enough knowledge on the space, but I think I agree with Divya that there's a great opportunity for making a brand digitally. I think if you're competing with a set of brands which have been built traditionally, it's important for that brand manager or that marketing team to see what would they need to do digitally to overcome the credibility and trust and legacy that the existing brands have. And they need to, because they're digital, they need to see which parts of the digital medium and spots they need to sort of flex to get that credibility. That for me is the most important thing if you're competing as a digital-only brand in a place which has traditional legacy brands also existing. So how do you sort of bring up your level of trust and credibility to the same place? Because people might have seen that brand on packs, on shops, on display windows, in traditional media. How do you bring that up? How do you use digital to get the same level of credibility and trust?
Right. Thank you so much. I think these were, we have lots more questions, but I think the organizers will kick us off the stage. I don't know if that happens in this virtual world anymore.
No. I was, surprisingly, I'm majorly into dystopian stuff. So I was just reading a book yesterday where, human beings eventually to live forever shall become a black box that shall be the virtually ever after, and people can have 100% all the feelings, all the emotions, everything. So yes, your virtual kick is very much possible with it. Let's get off the path.
I think this would just be like not in the virtual studio, but yeah, I think this is fantastic.
Right.
Sorry, Vivek, you were saying something. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to sign off on our behalf and thank you very much for being there on this session. Like I said, I wish we were face to face. We would have caught up more over coffee, and I'm sure we would have caught up more people, post the session with their questions. Sorry, guys, but maybe till the next edition or till the next episode, till the next year, or whenever we get together next, we'll probably answer those questions.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would just say thanks, Vivek, for this. And just for everybody who's listening, the messy is manageable. So don't take away the fact that messy is unmanageable. Just go ahead and try to start managing it.
Yeah, I would say the same. Begin somewhere, because once you begin, you start decoding, and it's nothing that you cannot decode, guys. So take care, and thank you so much for having us and listening to us.
See you, everybody. Stay safe.
See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.